Thank you for inviting me to speak today. My name is Sandra Stone, and I'm a professor in the Department of Criminology and a faculty affiliate of the Risk to Resilience Trafficking in Persons Research Lab at the University of South Florida. Prior to my career in higher education, I was a social worker and have experience in child protective services, health care, domestic violence, and juvenile justice. My topic is the intersection of child sexual abuse and commercial sexual exploitation of children, two issues that are unfortunately linked more often than we realize. As pediatricians, you are on the front lines of identifying, supporting, and protecting children. Today, I'll share definitions, scope, risk factors, impacts, and what we can do collectively to respond to and prevent the short and long-term harms from these experiences. Although certainly not a new phenomenon, child abuse, including child sexual abuse, was not officially recognized and legally prohibited in the United States until the 1960s, thanks to the work of a pediatrician, Dr. Henry Kemp. Also not new, and even more recently, commercial sexual exploitation, including commercial sexual exploitation of children, was not officially recognized and legally prohibited in the United States until the passage of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act in 2000. Child sexual abuse and the commercial sexual exploitation of children are not completely separate issues and often intersect. Survivors of child sexual abuse are at significantly higher risk of child sexual exploitation later and often experience compounded trauma and other harms as a result. Understanding this intersection is vital for developing effective prevention and intervention strategies. Let's look at the extent of the problem. For child sexual abuse, exact numbers are not possible to obtain, but all states have mandatory reporting requirements, and data are collected and monitored at the national level. Based on the data that are available, estimates are that in the United States, approximately 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 20 boys are affected by child sexual abuse. In 2022, over 558,000 children were confirmed victims of abuse or neglect. More than 11% of those children, over 61,000, were sexual abuse cases. Globally, the World Health Organization estimates 1 billion children experience sexual violence. And estimates are that approximately 90% of perpetrators are known to the child. That means family members, caregivers, or other trusted adults. Risk factors for child sexual abuse are multifaceted. Individual and family factors may include such things as stressful family life, poor supervision and communication, loneliness and isolation, disabilities of the child, low self-esteem and poor boundaries, and LGBTQ+ identification. Perpetrator factors may include being a prior victim of abuse themselves, inability to establish healthy adult intimate relationships, deviant sexual interests, and using sex as a coping strategy when under stress. Societal level factors may include tolerance for sexual violence and abuse, stigma for victims, secrecy of the activities, lack of awareness of the problem, racism, and poverty. The impacts of child sexual abuse are profound, including mental health, which could include anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, physical health, which could include such things as sexually transmitted infections, increased risk of chronic illnesses, and behavioral issues, which could include substance abuse, risky sexual behavior, and higher risks for suicide. Children often run away or are removed from their homes and enter foster care, both of which can set them on a path toward even greater vulnerability. Commercial sexual exploitation of children is even harder to measure due to underreporting, the hidden nature of the crime, the lack of mandatory reporting, and thus the lack of any kind of centralized data collection system. But based on what we do know from various sources, the indicators are disturbing. A 2022 scoping review included one study that suggested hundreds of thousands of children are at risk annually in the United States. In 2023, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received 25,000 reports of possible child sex trafficking. And in 2024, the National Human Trafficking Hotline identified nearly 12,000 cases involving 2,600 children. Children in foster care, runaway youth, homeless youth, and LGBTQ+ youth are disproportionately represented in these numbers. Risk factors for the commercial sexual exploitation of children overlap with those for child sexual abuse, but are expanded a little further. Prior sexual abuse is one of the strongest predictors of the commercial sexual exploitation of children. Homelessness, running away, foster care, involvement with the juvenile justice system, family rejection, substance use, identification as LGBTQ+, and poverty increase vulnerability. Exploiters often prey on children searching to get their basic needs met or looking for a sense of belonging. Children who have experienced child sexual abuse are at a significantly increased risk of later commercial exploitation. Because abuse erodes boundaries in self-esteem, damages trust of caregivers, and may push children into environments such as the foster care system or the streets, makes them more vulnerable and puts them in places where traffickers are waiting. The impact of commercial sexual exploitation of children is multifaceted and similar to that of child sexual abuse. Children may suffer physical problems such as injuries, STIs, and unwanted pregnancy. They may have mental health issues such as complex PTSD, depression, suicidality, nightmares, and identity confusion, and behavioral disorders such as substance abuse, risky sexual behavior, disrupted education, attachment disorders, and limited life skills. When children are victims of both child sexual abuse and the commercial sexual exploitation of children, the trauma is compounded, leaving them with even deeper scars. Some victims may suffer very long-term negative outcomes, such as criminalization, social stigma and isolation, difficulty reintegrating into a normal life, chronic health issues, homelessness, poverty, and re-victimization. Unfortunately, our systems often fail these children. Child protection and law enforcement are often inadequate and may not identify victims or misidentify them as offenders in the case of commercial sexual exploitation of children, thus either leaving them vulnerable or criminalizing their behavior, leading to a sexual abuse to prison pipeline. Frontline workers are not adequately trained to identify child sexual abuse and the commercial sexual exploitation of children. Services are lacking or not appropriate. For example, most services for commercial sexual exploitation of children victims are designed for girls, although boys are victims too. There is a lack of standard definitions across jurisdictions and inadequate or non-existent, in the case of child sexual exploitation, systems for centralized data collection and trafficking. But the prevention is possible. Some suggested strategies include promoting norms that protect against violence and abuse, teaching children skills to prevent sexual exploitation, including setting boundaries, empowering both girls and boys, creating environments that are safe for children in schools and youth programs and clinics and other places, supporting victims early to reduce harm and prevent re-victimization, providing parenting education, home visitation, and early childhood support. And at the societal level, prevention of child sexual abuse requires other strategies such as economic support for vulnerable families, public education and awareness campaigns to reduce the stigma and improve reporting, collaboration between child welfare, healthcare, and law enforcement agencies, support for quality research to determine effective prevention and early intervention strategies and promote evidence-informed practices, and funding for prevention and intervention programs and services that is also very critical. Organizations that work with children can also assist in prevention by creating safe environments through conducting background checks and screening for anyone having direct contact with children, establishing clear codes of conduct and reporting procedures, and providing adequate training for anyone having direct contact with children. Prevention measures recommended for child sexual abuse are also applicable to the commercial sexual exploitation of children, with perhaps the addition of the following: recognizing and providing care for very complex trauma, providing mentorships and other opportunities for children to develop or reestablish trusting relationships with adults, and providing education for children on commercial sexual exploitation, especially digital safety education to help prevent online grooming and exploitation. Additional societal-level prevention strategies may include collaborative research on technologies and offender behaviors with law enforcement, NGOs, health providers, and tech companies to better understand and disrupt exploitation networks. Sex offender registration enforcement is important. Advocacy for stronger laws to protect and provide support for victims, including strengthening legal protections to ensure that victims are not criminalized. And maybe most importantly, advocate and work for cultural change to end demand. So as you see, there's a great deal of overlap with child sexual abuse and the commercial sexual exploitation of children. So how do we address both? Comprehensive prevention and intervention programs and services that are trauma-informed and victim-centered, early identification and intervention, education for the public and more specific training for frontline workers, cross-sector collaboration with multidisciplinary teams, digital literacy, and policies that avoid criminalizing victims and instead connect them with resources, and advocacy for change in societal and cultural norms. To close, child sexual abuse and the commercial sexual exploitation of children are interconnected occurrences with devastating long-term consequences that urgently require attention. To avoid further systemic failures, comprehensive prevention and intervention strategies are needed, involving multidisciplinary collaboration, and policies and practices must be trauma-informed and victim-centered. As pediatricians, you play a critical role. You are often the first to notice signs, the first to ask questions, and the first in a position to provide support. By being aware, trauma-informed, and proactive, you can make an enormous difference in prevention, early intervention, and healing for these children. Thank you.